So what we want to do is cultivate cultivate a capacity for kindness. So, close your eyes. Take a few moments to breathe in and breathe out. All right. Welcome to another HealthyGamerGG stream. My name is Dr. Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational or entertainment purposes only. If y'all have a medical concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, we are going to be talking, we're going to be talking about self-improvement. And I understand that there are some fun things that I get to react to today, so let's dive right in. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's talk about self-improvement. Y'all, are any improvers in chat while we are... Oh. Okay, here's... All right, let's see. Oh, hold on. Wait, this guy's... Oh, select two objects that are the same shape. Select two objects that are the same shape, okay? All right. So I'm going to listen to this. I don't know if you guys can hear this. Let's see if y'all can hear it. Okay, let's get started. Can y'all see this? Hold on. Give me a second, chat. Okay. I'm going to just try playing this. Can y'all hear okay? Oh, let's do this. I understand now. There we go. So let's do this. I don't know how loud this is going to be, so be careful, chat. Okay. Toothbrush. 4 a.m. Love it. Okay. So we're 4 hours in. Okay. That's kind of interesting. I wonder how y'all feel about that. Feelers in chat. So, what do y'all think about that morning routine? Oh, no. It's auto playing. Stop it. No sound of video. Okay. Yeah, so this seems to be like a big meme, I guess. What do y'all think? I mean, so look, I may have kind of a hot take on this. Okay. So, we have all these extravagant morning routines. Like, I think that's so what people seem to be reacting to is the extravagance of it. Maybe it's performative. I don't know. I mean, it is recorded, right? So maybe that's like literally a performance. Um, but I think first of all, so in a sense, my morning routine is like somewhat similar. So there was a period of time where I wake up at 4 a.m. And if you kind of look at it like just don't, and I imagine that the way that they're portraying the morning routine is that it is very like glamorous, right? So he uses, I guess, some fancy bottled water to rinse out his mouth, which is fine, I guess. I mean, if you have the money and you like the bottled water and you want to rinse with bottled water, like go for it. He goes for a swim. It looks like he has a really nice balcony. Like, I think that's all fine. But I think the substance of the morning routine is like pretty good. Like you wake up at 4 a.m. It sounds like he takes some time in the morning to really like prepare for his day before he actually gets to his day, which I think is good. Seems like he meditates, seems like he brushes his teeth. I think that's okay. And then the second thing is that I think, the key thing here is that all of the working out, it seems like his job is doing that, right? So like he shows a lot of working out, but that's his job. So yeah, I mean it has ad vibes, but whatever. I think it's okay. So I think the more like important thing is, um, there are a lot of people who are super focused on having a super optimal morning routine, and I think that what we can kind of like end up with is, I mean, I'm not quite sure if this is something that people are supposed to like mimic or what. Yeah, so I think for those of y'all that are like inspired by it, like great. I think it's not. I would not get distracted by all the glamour and all of the specific high quality stuff that he uses, presumably like his shoes or whatever. And if y'all can't go for a swim in your private pool, okay, Anthony's gonna play the video. So Anthony, it's in there's a link to it. I can show it to you. Sorry about that, chat, if you guys didn't see it, but this is let's see if we can get that going. Thanks, Crow. Yeah, so I think that someone else is saying like, look, my morning routine is productive if I don't start on my phone for the first 30 minutes. I think that's great. I think that's like a fantastically productive morning routine. I think one of the biggest things that we do. So understand this, okay? Going on your phone first thing in the morning is one of the worst things that you can absolutely do. And the reason for that is because when we wake up first thing in the morning, our dopamine stores are full. So we have basically a limited amount of dopamine every single day. That's not technically true. It gets released, gets repackaged into vesicles, but then there's, basically it's like our dopamine regeneration rate is really low during the day, and we basically like max out to full at the overnight. So the first thing that you wake up in the morning, your dopamine stores are going to be full. Now remember that dopamine does a couple of things. It provides behavioral reinforcement for whatever tasks you do. It provides pleasure, and it provides craving. So when you dump all your dopamine first thing in the morning, you have very little left over, so that if you do productive work, there's going to be very little reinforcement happening for those behaviors, right? So if I empty my phone, if I empty my dopamine on my phone and then I go do work, work feels like we're burnt out. Like there's just no positive reinforcement even from doing a good job. And so then people wonder, like, why am I so burnt out all the time? Why is work such a slog? Because your capacity to extract pleasure from work actually gets delayed. Oh, what is this? Okay, this looks like there's a window here. There we go. You want to play it again, Anthony? Yeah, so is lip sync off? I think that's probably because of. Can you all hear this? No. Okay. We got to make it bigger and we can't hear audio. Maybe we'll work off we'll sort of sort that stuff out later. I think I'm going to we'll troubleshoot some of that, chat. Sorry about that. So let me do one other thing. Okay. Okay. Let's just dive in. So I'm going to if y'all are saying that there's a lip issue, I think I'm going to try this for a second. Okay. So let's take a look at our first post for the day. Okay. I'm stuck in this loop of self-improvement. So I relate to this so much. I feel like I'm improvement gooning since years without progress. I've been watching self-improvement content like Reels, YouTube videos, advice subs for the last 3 to 4 years, but I feel like I haven't made any real progress. Every time I see a motivational video, I feel inspired, but I never take action. My save later list is just piled up with years of videos, Reels, which I probably won't be able to watch. I'm 27 now, and I got into self-improvement after being rejected by a girl I liked. Since then, I've been single and trying to improve myself, but I feel like I'm collecting information instead of actually applying it. For example, I'll watch a video reel saying, don't worry about what others think, stop comparing yourself to others. It makes sense in theory, but the moment I go out and try to interact, those same thoughts of self-judgment and comparison start kicking in. Has anyone else been in this loop? How do you actually break out of this? Be honest, I don't need another just put yourself out there response. 24-year-old improver. Currently learning a new foreign language, read 50 books this year, bench press 120 kg, trying to run 4 kilometers in 20 minutes, quit smoking, quit drinking, will quit smoking, doesn't care about anything, just wants to improve himself. I'm improving, does nothing all day, only improves. Okay. So I think these are actually two different things, right? So there's the actual 24-year-old improver, and there is the, hold on a second. And so there's the actual 24-year-old improver. Hold on. Let me see if this is this speeding up. Is there still a delay? No, we fixed it, right? Does this feel fixed to y'all? Or there's still a delay? No. Worse. It's fine. No delay. Still delay. Good. There's no delay. Okay, whatever. We're going to just keep going. All right. So there are two things here, okay? The first is there's the person who's actually like addicted to self-improvement and improving all the time. And then there's the person who wants to improve, watches a bunch of improvement content, and doesn't actually improve. And so if we want to understand these two things, like this is what's, the person says, look, I don't want just another put yourself out there advice, which is great. So I think this is a really classic example of not understanding the different pieces of the puzzle. Okay. So here's what I mean. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and go back to this for a second. And then let me see if I can see what happens if I do this. I'm playing around, chat. Okay, so, oh, no, here. Hold on. Sorry, chat. There we go. Okay. So, let's understand a couple of things. What we're going to do is go through this line by line, or not line by line, but paragraph by paragraph, and understand a couple of different mechanisms that are going on, why people get addicted to self-improvement. Okay, so the first is, I'm 27 now, and I got into self-improvement after getting rejected by a girl that I liked. Since then, I have been single and trying to improve myself, but I feel like I'm collecting information instead of actually applying it. So now we have to understand a little bit about neuroscience and psychology. So what is the motivation behind self-improvement? If the motivation behind self-improvement is emotion, right? So we have a temporary emotion of feeling rejected. If you feel rejected and you think to yourself, okay, now that I am rejected, I'm going to go improve. What that means is that the driver for your improvement is an emotion, which means that your brain is going to try to fix your emotional state, right? That's what the driver is. I feel hurt. The goal is to not feel hurt. So really simple example, right? So if I feel hungry, I'm not going to go drink water. If I feel hungry, I'm going to eat something. If I feel thirsty, I'm going to drink something. If I feel dejected, what I'm going to try to do is feel accepted. So our brain understands that when we have a signal of like, I'm deficient in some way, we correct it by fixing that signal. Now let's look a little bit closer. I've been watching self-improvement videos for the last 3 to 4 years, but I feel like I haven't made any real progress. Every time I see a motivational video, I feel inspired, but I never take action. So stop for a second. Hold on. If our driver for self-improvement is to change our internal emotional state, what is the brain going to do? It's not actually going to improve. It's going to try to change our internal emotional state. So the moment that you feel inspired by watching some kind of self-improvement video, then you have fixed the problem, right? So I feel dejected, now I feel inspired. The whole goal is to change my emotional state, right? That's what the driving force is. And so now we also see why this sort of essentially creates a loop, because that once the inspiration goes away, so you save it for later, right? So you save it for later. But once the inspiration goes away, the next day I wake up, I still feel dejected. Now my brain asks itself, okay, when we're feeling dejected, what helps us feel better? Because watching self-help content inspires you. And your brain is like, we feel bad, let's feel good. Simple, right? I'm hungry, let me eat something. And then it learns, oh, you know what works really well? Watching inspirational, motivational content. So then it goes and watches inspirational, motivational content again. And as you repeat that cycle over and over and over again, this behavior gets reinforced. Oh, I'm thirsty, let me go to the well and get water. I'm thirsty again, let me go to the well and get water. I'm thirsty again, let me go to the well and get water. So this is why if you are trying to improve because you feel hurt in some way, that is going to be a very, very dangerous way to improve. It used to work. Okay, so this is the key thing that has changed in the technological age. In the past, when I got rejected by someone and I said to myself, okay, I don't want to feel rejected anymore. I want to feel proud. The problem is that 100 years ago, there were no shortcut dopaminergic tickets to feeling inspired. I couldn't just like sit back and watch something on the internet and feel inspired, feel better about myself, right? Inspiration was not at our fingertips. Inspiration required, and that's not even inspiration. If we wanted to correct our emotional state, we had to go and accomplish something. So I actually had to go to the gym to fix my emotional state. So now the world that we live in is one where, since we have such an easy emotional inspiration at our fingertips, which corrects our original emotional driver for improvement, fixes it, right? So if I'm improving because I feel dejected and I no longer feel dejected, I don't want to improve. And what has your brain learned is the primary way to deal with dejection? Watch an inspirational video on the internet. Done. Simple. So this person is spot on. You know, because now what's going on is there's this, I want y'all to understand this really, really well. Okay. So this person is saying, okay, I'm frustrated. Don't just tell me to put myself out there. Fair enough. We're not going to just tell you to put yourself out there. The first thing that you need to understand is this cycle is completely independent and has nothing to do with the process of improvement. We could substitute with this with, I feel unloved in the morning and I need my partner to tell me I love you, right? So if we have an emotional, if something's missing in us emotionally, we need some kind of emotional reinforcement. So then what happens is this person even says, look, this person says, I'm 27 now and I got, for example, I'll watch a video, stop comparing yourself to others, and it makes sense in theory. But the moment that I go out and try to interact, those same thoughts of self-judgment and comparison start kicking in, right? So this is literally what happens. Because the moment that you go and try to interact with someone, the feelings of dejection arise again. Because watching inspirational videos on the internet does not process feelings of being a loser. It just makes them go away temporarily. Then you go out into the world and these feelings will come up again. Right? So I don't know if this kind of makes sense, but like if you go out and interact in the world and there's a feeling that always comes up. I feel anxious, I feel concerned, I feel worried, I feel uncomfortable. If this feeling is always coming up, it lives within you and must be dealt with directly. As long as that feeling is there, it's going to keep popping up, and no amount of watching inspirational videos is going to change that. Right? So this is not even about self-improvement. This is about managing your emotions internally. So there are 2 or 3 different methods that you can do to fix this. The first is that you can go back to the original insult, right? So these are like sort of techniques of like trauma processing. We go into a bunch of detail in this in Dr. K's guide if y'all want more like info. There's like 10 hours of this stuff in there. But here's the basic idea, okay? So in that moment where you get rejected by someone, there is one experience that your brain forms conclusions based off of. So if I get rejected, that is just a rejection. That's all it is. It's one rejection. Happens all the time. But if you're not careful, your brain will learn from that rejection. It will say, oh, it tries to understand this rejection. It concludes that I am a loser. Now, even though that event is one time, the feeling of loser lives within you, and it'll keep popping up when you start to go out and you do things. So one of the techniques that you can do is go back in time and try to ask yourself, how did I form this conclusion from this single event? Right? And your mind will give you lots of logical reasons, which is why this is hard to do on your own. But that's where we have to reinterpret the past. Okay, so why do I see this as I am a loser and I need to fundamentally fix myself, as opposed to this was just one rejection, right? Maybe they were having a bad day. Maybe they're asexual. Maybe they're in a relationship. Maybe they're not attracted to my gender, like whatever. There are all kinds of reasons that this person could say this. But why do we make a conclusion about it? So we have to go back and reinterpret the conclusion. The second thing that we do, and this person says, just put yourself out there. So this is going to be how you just put yourself out there. Because a lot of people will say, just put yourself out there. And we hate just being told to put ourselves out there. But no one ever tells us how to put yourself out there. What is the purpose of putting yourself out there? It'll just get better if you put yourself out there. Here is literally what you want to do if you have trouble putting yourself out there. When you expose yourself to a particular situation, there is an environment that will evoke feelings within you. Those feelings will feel uncomfortable. You'll have comparisons in your mind. You'll have self-judgment in your mind. So this is where we need to learn a skill called distress tolerance. If you improve your distress tolerance, you will be able to put yourself out there. People who can put themselves out there, there's a big difference, right? Their capacity for distress tolerance is way higher. So here's the key thing. Putting yourself out there is not about putting yourself out there. It is about staying out there. So once I expose myself to this environment, which evokes these negative emotions in me, if I'm not careful, what I will then do is retreat, right? So if I feel anxious, my brain is sending me signals and says, run away, like Monty Python, run away. And if we retreat, then we're doing something incredibly dangerous. We are training our brain that when I feel anxious, the right response is running away. Now, that may be the correct response when we're living in the jungle and we're being hunted by a tiger, fair enough. But in today's world, that becomes maladaptive. So our brain is not designed for the modern world we live in. It's designed for, a world that existed like 600,000 years ago. That's how it evolved. So putting yourself out there and this is what people get like really confused about. They think like, okay, if I just mindlessly put myself out there enough, then I will get better. That's not what it is. What you need to do is put yourself in situations that make you uncomfortable. That's phase one. Second thing is learn to tolerate that discomfort. Just don't react. Don't run away. Don't force yourself to engage. Just sit in that place. And what'll literally happen is our subjective sense of distress will gradually decrease. Sometimes it intensifies first and then it goes down. Right? So a great example of this is like if I jump into some cold water, it'll feel really cold for the first few seconds, and then my body acclimatizes. My brain literally acclimatizes. So even if you are feeling anxious in a social situation, as long as you don't keep feeding your thoughts, and we'll get to that in a second, you will acclimatize, and then the anxiety will go away. So now what you've managed to do is tolerate a difficult situation. Now you are in a social situation. You've done the first half of putting yourself out there. You're not even done yet. Then what you need to do is engage. This is what putting yourself out there is. It is tolerating your distress without avoidance, step number one. And this is the cool thing, is that you don't need to solve anything. All you need to do is tank the damage, and your brain will acclimatize on its own. Then what we want to do is the second phase of putting yourself out there. Now you want to engage, right? So now that you're in a social situation, you have less discomfort. Try talking to people. Try engaging with people. Walk up to someone and say, "Hi, my name is whatever. I'm new here. Do you come here often? Like, what do you think about today's lecture? Like, whatever is going on. Have you played this board game before?" Ask some inane question about the circumstance that y'all share. It's a way of opening a conversation. Then we engage in the behavior. And as we engage in the behavior without anxiety, this is really important. See, once we're anxious, our dopaminergic circuitry gets disabled. Okay? So if I'm like being hunted by a tiger, I can't like play D&D at the same time. So our amygdala goes and suppresses our dopaminergic circuitry. So we have to disable our amygdala, and then something cool will happen. Once we are in a situation that we're no longer distressed in, then our capacity for enjoyment increases. So as our capacity for enjoyment increases, I enjoy being at this lecture or whatever. Now I get a little bit of dopamine, so now I feel pleasure. Then I will also induce some craving and behavioral reinforcement. So then once I go home at the end of the day, there's a part of my brain will start to want to do that again. Now I have a positive association with putting myself out there. So a week later, I go out and I do it again, and the same sequence will happen. My distress will actually rise again. But I have to learn how to tolerate that distress. Distress goes down. Now the door opens for pleasure. Now I will engage with the people around me. Now I will experience some kind of pleasure. And then this gets reinforced. So when people say this, you should put yourself out there, they have subconsciously figured out this strategy. And the main reason that it's easy for some people to figure out and some people it's hard to figure out is the difference between their baseline distress tolerance. So if you are wired in a way where the signals are really, really high, then it's really hard to get used to it. And instead we run away. Whereas if you are wired, if you're more extroverted, if you're more open to, if you have a higher degree of openness, depending on your temperament, you can put yourself out there more easily. And this is why people will tell you to put yourself out there, and they make it sound so simple because it is simple for them. Because their experience of it is way easier than yours. That's why they can tell you, and it happens automatically. They don't even understand these phases. It happens automatically for them. So they just tell you, hey, just like do what I did, right? It's like, just do a cartwheel, bro. Just do a cartwheel. It's easy. It's that easy. So I can understand people's frustration with putting yourself out there as advice, because it doesn't work for some of us. And at the same time, it is still what you have to do, but we can explain to you what the steps are, and then you can put yourself out there. Now, there's one really important caveat to this, which is in the phase of distress tolerance. One of the key things that you don't want to do is engage with your anxiety. So when you have anxious thoughts, there are two things that can happen. You can tolerate the thoughts, or you can engage with them. And here's what engaging looks like. If y'all have experienced anxiety, you know it oftentimes it's not just one thought. One thought, oh my God, like I'm going to fail this test. And then what happens is there's another thought. If I fail the test, I'm going to fail the class. If I fail the class, I'm going to drop out of college. I'm going to fail out of college. If I fail out of college, I won't be able to find a job. If I can't find a job, I won't be able to find a partner. If I can't find a partner, I'll be alone for the rest of my life. I'll be a loser. So you see, there's this cascading chain of thoughts. So here's the problem with anxiety: is with this cascading chain of thoughts, our anxiety actually intensifies with each step. And as the anxiety intensifies, more thoughts will come. So distress tolerance when you are engaging in anxiety means literally shifting your attention away to something else. So my favorite example of this, or my favorite, like my kind of go-to, is breathing, right? So what we want to do is focus our attention on breathing. Take 60 seconds to breathe 3 times. So we're going to count to 10 as we breathe in and count to 10 as we breathe out. Do it with me. Breathe in and breathe out. In and out. Now, what do y'all notice about my voice? What do y'all notice about my affect, my emotion? What has happened to me? What has happened to you? 60 seconds. That's all it takes. Now, here's the reason why it's important to do 10 seconds in and 10 seconds out. If I tell you to breathe in and breathe out, just deep breathe. This is what the advice that people give. Just take 3 deep breaths. That doesn't work, because 3 deep breaths in an anxious state will still be shallow. You'll go, you'll do 3 deep breaths, but those deep breaths are not, you kind of run through them so quickly that there's enough momentum in the mind for the anxiety to continue. The goal of 10-second breaths in and out is that it demands your attention. You must concentrate it. You must focus on it to succeed. It doesn't happen automatically. It isn't easy to do. So what we want to do is give ourselves a task that requires and demands cognitive attention. The reason that we want to use breathing as opposed to other things is that when we have very slow exhalations and we have slow breaths in and slow breaths out, what will actually happen is our respiratory rate is normally 12 to 14. Once we decrease our respiratory rate to 3, it will change our oxygenation level. It'll change our carbon dioxide level. And as these things change, it will activate our nervous system in a different way. So you're sort of triggering vagus nerve activation, which is going to slow you down. So then that sort of works on the physiological level. So there is a cognitive level where if I am concentrating, I can't be anxious anymore. And we also want to use a technique ideally that will trigger our physiology. But if you don't like breathing or breathing makes you anxious, you can just concentrate on something for 60 seconds. Now, if you're anxious, you're going to think, oh my God, this is going to make me look so weird. So be it. You can go to the bathroom to do it. You can step outside to do it, or you can just breathe quietly to yourself for 60 seconds. I can almost guarantee you that if you're in a social interaction, you breathe for 60 seconds, unless you're like, people can usually talk about themselves for 60 seconds without a problem, right? So like if you feel weird about it, do it anyway, and then build that distress tolerance. Okay, so that's number 1. Breaking the loop of I'm addicted to self-help content, but I never do anything, involves understanding what the origin, what the driving motivation for the self-help content is, and recognizing that social media fixes that problem without any kind of improvement. Improvement has nothing to do with this. Now, let's move on to part 2. Now let's actually talk about the improver. Currently learning a new language, reading 50 books, quit drinking, will quit smoking, doesn't care about everything, just anything, wants to just improve themselves. I'm improving, does nothing all day, only improves. Okay. So what's going on here? Why are people so addicted to the 24-year-old improver? So I think self-improvement is good. I strive for self-improvement. I think it's good to improve. I'm working on a couple of things. But one of the most dangerous things that can happen is when improvement becomes the goal, right? So this is where, if we think about the nature of improvement, improvement is a means to an end, right? So why do I want to improve my communication? Because I want to get better in my relationship. Why do I want to learn a new language? Because I want to, I want to be able to travel to that country or whatever. So, like, this is where we have to understand something. Generally speaking, the reason that human beings, the way that your brain is wired to improve, is to accomplish a certain goal, right? That's how we know. I don't know if this kind of makes sense, but like, if I have trouble running a mile, my body will sense that physiological stress will increase my cardiovascular capacity, my muscles will start to grow and strengthen. Like, so we have this very simple, anytime you go to the gym, if you lift heavy weights, why do your muscles grow? Because your brain and your physiology recognize that if I'm trying to do a task and I'm not good at it, I need to get better at that task. So our brain and our body are trying to adapt to ideally succeed in various situations. That's why improvement exists. Okay. What happens with some people is that improvement becomes associated with some kind of psychological deficiency. So here's what I mean by that. So I'll give you all an example. So when I work with patients with body dysmorphia, this is what tends to happen. They have an abstract idea of beauty, right? What does it mean to be beautiful? There's an abstract idea that is not clearly definable. Then what happens is this idea of beauty becomes associated with certain measurable things like thinness or musculature. So men with body dysmorphia who are bodybuilders, they want these huge muscles, right? So I feel ugly. I'm striving for beauty. And now I don't know what beauty is. I don't know what ugliness really is. I can't define it. It's a feeling. And I am associating that with certain parameters like thinness or musculature. Let's just use thinness and talk about anorexia and body dysmorphia, okay? So then what happens is I think to myself, I am ugly and pretty is thin. Therefore, let me increase the thinness. Let me get more thin. Let me get more thin. Let me get more thin. But once again, the problem is that within you, you have a psychological injury that is not corrected by being thinner. So there's something that I feel ugly. Pretty people are thin. Let me pursue this. But this doesn't get healed. So then what happens is we wind up in a situation where people are getting thinner and thinner and thinner, but they never feel beautiful. The origin of feeling ugly is separate from thinness, but our brain connects these two things and relentlessly pursues one. This is what happens with 24-year-old improvers. You live in a world where you are told you need to be better. The world is competitive. You need to be an entrepreneur. You need to be 6 feet tall. You need to make 6 figures. You need to do this. You need to do that. And the world tells you that you are inadequate in 1,000 different ways. And so, especially if you're a man, men are something called external problem solvers, which means that if we feel something bad on the inside, we correct that by fixing something on the outside. If my wife is mad at me, I'm going to get her flowers. I'm going to get her a piece of jewelry. Therefore, she will not be mad at me. I'm not going to bother learning how to deal with her anger, how to manage her anger, how to manage my own sense of guilt when my partner is angry with me, right? So I'm going to correct the circumstance outside that makes me feel a certain way. I'm not going to manage my own feelings. I'm not going to be stoic about it. I'm going to shape my environment so that the environment sends me no more bad signals. This is how men get manipulated all the time. Because the moment that someone figures out, oh, if I get angry at him, he will buy me jewelry, you're just reinforcing them getting angry with you. So then they will create emotions for you over and over and over again. They will push your buttons so that you become a machine and you offer certain behaviors. Now, in the case of the 24-year-old improver, you are given a ton of anxiety and uncertainty about the world. You won't be able to date. You won't be able to make money. You won't be able to live this beautiful fitness influencer life, and this is what you want. And instead, what you need to do is improve. So there is a certain anxiety, there is a fear of uncertainty, and you think to yourself, okay, if I get better, if I get better, if I get better, if I get better, if I keep on getting better, then my chances of more money, more sex, and more everything improve. So you just start relentlessly chasing that. And the reason that it's never satisfying is because there isn't a particular goal. If your goal is to be better so that the future is less risky, when does that end? When do you feel accomplished? When do you feel content? When do you feel peace? And then what happens is the 24-year-old improver says, I know what I need to do. I need to increase my competency at being peaceful. I need to go to someone. The number of improvement chads that have crossed my, professional space because they're like, hey, Dr. K, can you teach me how to be at peace with myself? I need to improve that. I'm always unhappy with myself. Teach me contentment. Let me level up the skill of contentment, which is always a fun journey. I love it. It's a blast. Because I'll tell them, I will teach them contentment. It's something you can learn. But, it's a bit tricky. So the key thing, if you're someone who's kind of addicted to self-improvement, is you got to really spend some time thinking about where is the driving force for this coming from. Second thing that you can do is learning how to feel content and just sitting with yourself. So this is a little bit harder, but it's harder to explain. It's not so hard to do, but right, really stop and reflect about just really look at yourself. Where is this desire for improvement coming from? When I improve, how do I feel about myself? And even if you feel better every time you go to the gym, this is also, now we get to one advanced point. So you may notice, okay, there's an emptiness within me, or there's something that is unhappy within me. And every time I go to the gym, every time I learn a language, I feel better. So then you keep doing it, right? Because you have an emotion of something missing, you improve yourself, and then it feels better. So this cycle repeats over and over and over again. And then the question that you need to ask yourself, the second level question you need to ask yourself is, why does so what you'll notice is that the feeling of relief from improvement is temporary. And then tomorrow, I need to go to the gym again. And I need to go to the gym. Now I need to learn a language. Now I need to read 50 books. Now I need to do all this stuff. Okay? So if the feeling is temporary, hold on a second. How do I ever make this feeling go away forever? Or am I going to be on this endless treadmill of improvement? So this is also a scenario where people sort of discover that improving makes them feel better on the inside, but only for a time, which is why they become addicted to the improvement itself. I'm all for improving. I'm not saying you shouldn't improve, but you shouldn't mindlessly improve. You should improve with intention. And then the other thing that you can learn how to do, and this is beautiful, so now we'll go to step 3, is spend a day doing nothing. Intentionally doing nothing, and watch as the feelings of inadequacy start to arise. And as the feelings of inadequacy start to arise, practice distress tolerance. Just watch them, breathe in and breathe out until the anxiety goes away. And then you will start the path of being free from self-improvement. I know everyone's saying done already. Easy, 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 easy. I can do nothing all day. Okay. Let's move on. 1 second. I gotta fix something. All right. Next. Okay. Why we need to stop telling people that self-improvement is a solution to their dating woes. Okay, let me just make sure that this is functioning properly. I can see this, right? Okay, great. Whenever my friend talks to me about relationships and dating, if I tell him about how things didn't go for this girl or something, he would tell me that I need to go to the gym, I need to self-improve, I need to work on myself, I need to put myself out there, I need to lower my standards. I feel like he thinks advice like these are helpful, but I realize now why these kinds of advice tend to be more harmful than helpful and why self-improvement eventually backfired on me. It feels like the advice is rooted on the idea that you're not enough. You didn't put yourself out there enough. You didn't work out enough. You don't make enough money. You didn't have enough dating experience. You didn't focus on yourself enough. Somehow we are made to think that if a girl doesn't like us back or it didn't go well, there's something we failed or didn't do enough. Hence, the advice of self-improvement keeps getting thrown around as if that would solve our problems. But by giving that advice, it's like you are telling the person that they aren't enough. You can't expect people to love themselves while implicitly telling them that they aren't enough. What people fail to realize is that dating is one of those things where you can do all the right things and still fail. You can be good enough and the girl will still not like you back, while a girl can like you even if you're not in your most optimal form. There's a lot of luck that comes to play, yet somehow we like telling people that their failure is because they are not good enough. You know what they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So it might seem like telling people to self-improve so that they can do better with dating is good advice, but you're really just telling them that they're not good enough and hitting their self-esteem. Maybe they would try to self-improve, but now it comes from a place of insecurity and incompleteness, so it's bound to backfire. So I think there's a lot of great stuff in this post, right? So when someone struggles with dating, we'll tell them, hey, just go to the gym, just improve, just do better, bro. And sometimes when we get this kind of advice, it implies that we aren't enough. So if you guys want to understand how to deal with this is going to be a little bit challenging, okay? I think there's a really simple way to solve, I want to say, 80 to 90% of the problems in your dating life. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's simple. It doesn't have a bazillion steps. That's all it means. So when we look at this post, okay, and I know what y'all are going to say when I say that, right? So it feels like this advice is rooted on the idea that you are not enough. So when we interact with the world, there is the actual information and existence of the world outside of us. And then there is our interpretation of the events around us. So if we were to look at this advice, if you're someone who struggles to date and someone gives you advice to improve your life, I think that is good advice, right? So let's understand this. This person is completely correct that there is nothing you can do in the dating world to guarantee success because there is another human being involved, at least for now, until we get love robots, right? There's another human being with another set of preferences, another set of feelings, another set of circumstances. And there's no way that you can guarantee success. So now the issue becomes, okay, if I'm approaching dating and there's nothing I can do to guarantee success, what is in my control? So what is in my control are things like improving my attractiveness, improving my financial potential, right? So it's really interesting where a lot of people, think that there are a couple of different things that research shows that people look for in partners, okay? The first is kindness. So this isn't being nice, this is being kind, trying to be a good person. So when people are assessing each other, they're trying to figure out, okay, how will this person treat me? How will they treat the people that I care about? So kindness is really important. The second one is intelligence, right? So people tend to look for partners that can effectively solve problems. One of the best signals of intelligence, by the way, is wit. So we tend to assess people's intelligence not by their degrees, but by their wit. The third thing is potential for financial security. So you want to be with someone who you believe as your relationship progresses, this person will be able to provide at a minimum for themselves and ideally for you. These are the things that we look for. So if you want to increase your chances of success, you can't do anything to guarantee success, but there are a lot of things that you can do to make yourself more attractive, to increase the odds. So I think it's a good idea to do those things. Now, this person still has a valid point that doing those things doesn't necessarily guarantee success. And now we come to the biggest problem in dating. which is not what the outside world is doing, but our reactions to things. So when I said there is a simple thing that you can do which will solve 80% of your dating problems, what was your reaction to my statement? Did you immediately say, oh my God, this guy is so full of it. This guy is like trying to sell me something. This guy doesn't know what my life is like. So what I want y'all to pay attention to is in your mind, how quickly and automatically you rejected what I was going to say. Right? Like immediately your mind has a response where it fills in the gaps. What was I going to say? Is there such a trick? Is it possible? You have no idea, but already your mind is making all kinds of judgments about me and what I'm going to say. You are not waiting for me to actually finish what I'm speaking. You are preemptively reacting to what I'm going to say. And I don't know if you guys have seen this. Let me see if I can pull this up. Okay, so like, I'm trying to look at, hold on. Let me find this. I'm trying to find, oh yeah. So let's look at this, okay? So like had a really good time. Same. I always have a wonderful time. Dinner was amazing. Please don't take this the wrong way. What's up? Did you seriously only get me flowers? Is there something more coming? Dinner, I'm not complaining, right? So this text message goes on. The most female generic gift possible. Most girls don't care for them outside the movies, lol. It wouldn't be so bad if you got something else too, but just flowers. I also got dinner. It was fun. I'm confused. Dinner was an activity. Flowers are a gift. I'm not complaining about the activity of the evening. I'm complaining about the gift. Not that hard to understand, lol. Okay. So when I look at the worst horror stories on the internet, this is from Nice Girls. I strongly recommend Nice Girls and Nice Guys. Great way to learn what not to do when you're dating someone or going on dates. So if you pay attention to all of these terrible text exchanges, what you'll find is that you're not communicating with a person. You are communicating with someone who is projecting various things onto you. Right? So when I buy dinner and get you flowers, I'm running up against some kind of vision in this person's brain that is discongruent with reality. Expectations. What are those expectations? Based on oftentimes social media, influencers. The other problem is that when we ourselves are dating, what I tend to find is that people self-sabotage in dating all the time. And why do they self-sabotage? Because they are not operating based on reality. They are operating based on the projection. They are operating based on the assumptions and the associations that they attach to people's words. So in this case, I think if you are someone who is like out of shape, right? If your standards are like unrealistic, I think those are reasonable things to improve. This advice is rooted in the idea that you're not enough. This is the critical disagreement. They're not rooted in the advice that you are not enough. That is the interpretation. That is the way that your brain associates those things. I think most of this advice is rooted in the idea that, or here's how I would root it if I was giving it to someone, right? So now I'm making assumptions. I don't know if you guys noticed that. I made an assumption. My mind did it so quickly that, oh, this advice is rooted in this and not this. I don't know that. You see how quick it happens? Maybe this advice is all rooted in the idea that you're not enough. Who am I to say that the advice on the internet is all rooted in one place? Do I suddenly have psychic powers that I can understand the intentions of people, all of the human beings who posted advice on the internet? But do you see how quickly my mind jumps there? I know what the advice is. This is all BS. I don't know what the fuck. I'm not psychic. I don't know. And yet my mind jumps there so easily. This person's mind receives this information, which I think if I was offering the advice, what I would say is, look, there are certain things you can control, other things you can't control. There's no way to get to a 100% chance of success, but what are the things that you can do to increase your odds? What are the things that you can do to generally make yourself more competitive and more attractive to people that you're attracted to? Going to the gym, focusing on yourself, whatever. Like all that stuff sounds like steps in the right direction. I think that's reasonable. But oftentimes when we hear this advice, it activates our own insecurity. It's rooted in the idea that you're not good enough. I don't think it's rooted in the idea that you're not good enough. I think it's rooted in the idea that you can't control the way that someone else responds to you. All you can control is what you do and how you improve your own life. That's my root for that advice. But the key thing that we want to focus on, if you guys want to improve your dating life, what you need to do is stop operating from assumptions. Stop operating from associations. Catch all of the gaps in your thinking in the way that you fill them in. When someone doesn't text you back, does that mean that they're texting other people? How do you know that? So our brain operates with tons of assumptions. We fill in all kinds of gaps. We do not perceive what someone else is. What we perceive is our projection of them. Right? And now this becomes really difficult. Because if I am interacting not with who you are, but what I project on top of you, then that becomes really hard for the other person. Right? Because you're not basing anything based on, now we're kind of flipping things around. If you're projecting onto me, I'm not actually like what I actually do or say gets influenced by your vision of who I am. So if you give me the benefit of the doubt, then that's great. But if you don't give me the benefit of the doubt, then I'm constantly fighting an uphill battle. And I am 100% sure that each and every one of you has been on the receiving end of this kind of experience, where your parents don't give you appropriate credit. You used to be a certain way. They form an opinion of you. And then even though you change, they still treat you the old way. Right? So my favorite example of this is I worked with a patient who joined a company as an intern 6 months after another intern. So one intern joined like in April, the next intern joined in the fall, right? So this person has been there for 6 months. 4 years later, the intern who was there first is still lording it over. I've been here way longer than you. I came in first. I know more than you. I'm superior to you. I'm above you. Takes a lot of issue to like the second person getting promoted. They have the same job title, right? Because now you've been here for like 54 months and I've been here for 48 months. There's not that big of a difference between the two of us, right? Like the experience is basically leveled out. But this other person was like, I was here first. I'm technically more experienced than you are. Therefore, you should listen to me. It's all subconscious. So this person projects out, oh, this person, my colleague is inexperienced. I'm more experienced. Shapes all of their interactions. So you'll see this all the time where people, and like in dating is where it's the worst, where you're like the person you're dating or talking to on the app is not responding to you. They're responding to this amalgamation, some, Frankenstein's monster stitched together flesh golem of what they think men or women are. And for you to be on the receiving end of that feels impossible. Because you're not just trying to prove yourself, you are trying to prove yourself, but you're starting not from zero. You're starting from some negative 1,000 score that is based on all of this person's experiences with your gender that started 4 years ago. So you're climbing out of a hole that you didn't even make. Now, here's the crazy thing. We all do this. We all do this because our human brain draws conclusions from interactions so that it can make predictions about the future. I ate at this restaurant, I started throwing up. Therefore, the next time I go to this restaurant, I'm going to be worried about throwing up. That's just how it happens. So how can you fix your dating life with this? This is where what you need to do is remove as many associations as you can. Notice that when someone interacts with you, you attach all kinds of meanings to their interaction. Why aren't they texting you back? Why are they texting you back? Are they texting too much? What does that mean? What do all of their actions mean? This is the most important question to ask yourself. As you become aware of all of the stuff that you are attaching onto them, these things will slowly start to reduce. And then something cool will happen. You will start interacting with a human. You won't have green shades on, you won't have red shades on, right? So when you've got your red tinted glasses, red flags look gray, I guess, or normal. And when you have green tinted glasses, the red flags will still look gray, right? Everything looks positive or everything looks negative, like you can't tell. And so what we really need to do is refine our perception, judge the person for what they are. And now what's going to happen next, okay, let me just see if I'm right here with my hypothesis. Okay. Oh, no, actually. Oh, so when someone, okay, so this is interesting. Okay, so I'm impressed with the chat. So what I imagine that people would react with, but Dr. K, what about the other people, right? So even if I filter my perception or stop filtering my perceptions, if I start to see the world as it is, it doesn't correct for all the crazy people out there who don't do that. And you're 100% correct, right? But this is where what I've observed, this is so like back of the napkin kind of math, is that there are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who are living in the real world and people who are living on the internet. And these two people don't usually interact very often. There are camps of people who just exist on the internet, and their perception of what is going on in the world is based on the internet. And the reason I say that these people don't interact very often is because, so I'm a parent, I sometimes go to the playground with my kids. And there's a bunch of like 40-something, 50-something, late 30-something parents who are tired, sleep deprived, trying to get through the day. And they don't like live on the internet. They seem to be like relatively like, they're like kind of like normies. It's kind of weird, right? I'm the one 4chaner amongst all the normies. And so what I've noticed is that as you start cleaning your perception, you quickly realize, okay, this person is crazy, and you just move away from them. The other thing, really cool thing that happens is once you start doing this, other people who also do this will be attracted to you and you will be attracted to them. I don't mean romantically. It's like you quickly realize, okay, this person is like responding to who I am instead of some projection. And then you will gravitate towards them and they will gravitate towards you. Since you are actually responding to who the person is, your social skills improve drastically. Because the moment that they say, oh, I'm a liberal or I'm a conservative, it doesn't trigger rant.exe. You are able to accept this person for who they are. And everyone likes being treated for what they do. No one likes being treated for what other people project onto them. And so it's kind of bizarre how quickly you will enter a different world. A world where you have social events, a world where your friends will try to hook you up with people, a world where like you actually are meeting people who are like decent human beings and are not like completely judgmental, like right off the bat. Like it's crazy that this world exists. But this is not a world that you will find on the apps. Maybe some people from there will be on the apps, which is why a lot of people do end up, meeting and successfully engaging in relationships using dating apps. But it's like there's like two classes of people: the people who are quite, open-minded and have a clean perception, and people who don't. And then there's all sorts of other caveats to that. But make sense? Right? So it's the biggest problem with dating right now is the perceptions that we have. And what people don't realize is that, like, the world that they experience. So this is the biggest mistake that I think human beings make. The world that you experience is shaped a lot by your actions. There's a selection bias. So I see this all the time. So I had a patient who was incredibly wealthy, and they like to show it off. And then what they struggled with is that when they started dating someone, They were highly concerned that this person was just with them for their money. Right? So what they were doing is behaving in such a way where they lacked confidence, right? Because people don't love me for me, they love me for my money. So they have some set of experiences like this. Now that I lack confidence, what am I going to do to bolster my confidence? I'm going to buy really nice things so that people are impressed by me. Now that I buy really nice things so that people are impressed by me and I walk around trying to impress everyone, I select for the people who are attracted to nice things. And then when I start dating them, they seem to be really into nice things and very materialistic. But this is a situation that I created. This is the biggest mistake that a lot of people make. When I work with dudes who are alphas and are worried that women only want one thing, they approach women in a different way. They weed out all of the women right away who want something deeper and more meaningful. And you will select for the women who are transactional. Right? The results of any study that you do depend on your selection criteria, your inclusion criteria. Do y'all understand that? So the population that you select for will give you a result. If I recruit people who are self-made millionaires and I poll them about work ethic, and I take people who are inherited millionaires and I poll them for work ethic, the answers that I get will be very different. Make sense? So a lot of the reality that we live in is a function of our selection. And the problem is when we get really upset about something, we don't realize how much control we have over our lives. This is the real tragedy. We don't realize that we could live very different lives if we started living different lives. And this is why, I know this sounds crazy, but I believe this because we do this, right? This is what we do. So I did this for myself, and I spent my life now devoted to helping other people change the way that they live their lives. I took all of the stuff that I learned, developed it into something like a coaching program, and now the real question became, okay, is this only like the Dr. K effect? Is there a selection bias with me, or can we do this at scale? And what we found from our original study of 1,453, this is our pilot study of 1,453 clients, is that we see an average of over a 50% improvement in direction and purpose in life, 20 to 3% reductions in feelings of anxiety and sadness and stuff like that, right? So this is something that can be learned and can be taught. That's why we make these YouTube videos, because we try to teach these principles so that you can hopefully incorporate these principles. Right? If y'all are interested in getting there faster and working with someone, then by all means, check out the coaching program. If not, we're going to continue streaming. We have a ton of videos, all kinds of stuff, right? So do what works for you. Okay, so there's a lot of people who are saying my situation is different. I don't make any money for what I do. I can't say that about everyone. So that's also why. So I want y'all to understand this, okay? So there's a big problem with advice, which is that advice is generic. So people will say, oh, this is terrible advice. This is good advice. The whole purpose of advice is that it is information. It is guidance that is offered without any specificity. Y'all get that? That's why advice, generally speaking, sucks. So especially advice that you get on the internet is not made for you. Here's been my overwhelming experience as a psychiatrist. If you want to improve your life, you have to tailor things to your life. So we watched this video at the very beginning about, some guy who uses bottled water to rinse out his mouth and goes for a swim and whatever, right? So any advice that this person gives is going to be hard to translate to your situation. And a lot of people get confused about oh my God, why is Dr. K talking about coaching? Why is he doing this? Why doesn't he just make more YouTube videos? It's because YouTube videos are going to, or streams like this, are going to have a drop-off in applicability to your situation. I'm not saying they're not useful. I love it, right? So generic advice, we see, by the way, people who watch our content, their depression and anxiety may improve by somewhere around 9%. We have some data to that effect. We haven't formally studied it. And that makes sense, right? So when I make a YouTube video, if you watch our content regularly, we're worth like maybe a 10% bump. It's like pretty good. I imagine that the range is actually greater. Like, so some people improve a lot, some people improve less. But the key thing is if you're struggling, like, I think it's really important to work with an individual, right? Because that person can take certain principles, apply them to your individual life. So the yield will be way better. The analogy that I'd use is like, you can watch a YouTube video about how to play a game successfully. That's very different from working with a coach who is analyzing your replays. Which one do you think will result in a greater increase in rank faster? Like, I started working with a Dota 2 coach and my rank climbed by like, about 1,000 MMR, like in a month. And it's because they're tailored to your specific problems. Okay. Let's see. Let's do another one. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to watch this, but I will try. Let's see. Okay, because with I'm going to post a link so that y'all can follow along in case the audio doesn't work. And for those of y'all that are just don't have the luxury of looking, I apologize. We're going to work on the technical side of this later. Okay?
But I literally can't. What to do? I'm not made for.
Okay. So let's take I don't know if it was it playing somewhere else? Okay. Did y'all catch that? I posted a link. We couldn't hear it. Okay, yeah. So sorry about that, y'all. So we're posting the link again. We had audio at the end. That's so weird. Okay, so we're working on we've changed our live stream setup. Oh God. Okay. So there's some stuff, when people see this, I think a lot of people's reaction is, okay, look, like, I don't know what you were expecting. I mean, so working 40 hours a week, is what you have to do to sustain yourself. Like, where do you get the idea that you're entitled to anything more? So when I think about people like my grandmother, this is the sort of thing that I think is so hard for us to understand. We'll get into why that is. But when my grandmother was growing up, like, survival was not guaranteed. They would get money on the first of the month, and they would literally run out of money on the 25th of the month. They would not have any money left over for food or things like that. They would run out of flour. They would run out of sugar. So, like, survival is not even guaranteed. Like, even having a place to live and being able to pay for your food, that is the standard that is not guaranteed if you lived in the world 100 years ago. Even being able to do that was considered a success. Because a lot of people didn't have that. Infant mortality was 20%. So now we look at this, and a lot of people will be like, okay, like, what do you expect, right? Life is hard. You got to work 40 hours a week, and then you got to, like, lift yourself up, and you got to, like, get paid more. Maybe live with a roommate, like, change your circumstance. I think all that stuff has some merit to it. But let's understand how we ended up here. How did we end up in a situation where there's a generation of people who works 40 hours a week, can barely pay their rent, and seems to have, like, no forward trajectory? So I think the reason that some people will look at this and think, oh my God, these kids are so entitled. So is actually because of the boomers. And I'm not blaming them, but let's understand this. So the entitlement that your children grow up with depend on what you teach them. Right? So when we're saying, hey, I'm working 40 hours a week and I'm basically, like, stuck at neutral, right? There's no upward trajectory. And someone says you should work harder, they are operating based on the assumptions that they grew up with, where when you worked 40 hours a week 50 years ago, that was enough for upward financial trajectory. The ratio between income and acquiring a house and how much rent was and things like that were such that 40 hours a week was sufficient for upward trajectory. The world was also filled with opportunity to where if you exerted yourself a little bit harder, you could actually get promoted. You could like, start a side hustle, like, whatever. So if we look at the period between, like, let's say 1950 and, like, 2005, I think that was a period of unprecedented economic prosperity from a circumstantial standpoint. So when you have a generation of people who grow up with economic prosperity, their assumptions about how the world works are completely different. You can do something, you can just start a .com in 1992 and you could sell it for a ton of money. Like, that's just what happened. Right? If you were in college in the 60s, you could do a bunch of LSD and a bunch of marijuana on some liberal college campus, roll into some banking job, and then just get promoted and have pensions and stuff that were relatively intact. And then you could retire at the age of 2000 with all of your .com stocks, and you could be totally fine. So then you have a generation of people with economic prosperity. And so what do they instill in their children? They instill in their children that, hey, if you sort of, like, work somewhat, but you don't need to work super hard, like, you just kind of lift yourself up by your bootstraps, because that's what I did. Because when I lifted myself up, I had so much upward momentum that it was easy to lift myself up by my bootstraps. So you should be able to do it too. So what I've noticed is that we have an entitled generation. And the reason we have an entitled generation is because we learned that entitlement, our perception of what the world was supposed to be, was based on a generation above us for whom things were objectively easier. And now we inherit a way of looking at the world, a relationship with work, and our expectations from our parents. And then now we are getting crushed because the reality has changed. And the reality of the world today is that things have been optimized. Optimization is the worst thing that has happened. So if you look at a video game, so this happened in Dota 2 recently. This is really interesting. So what they did in Dota 2 is they made the top 0.5% of matches private. So what used to happen is a patch would come out, There would be APIs that scrape professional player data, and the meta would get figured out within 24 hours. And everyone in the game is just copying the meta that the pros are doing at the highest brackets. So Dota made a change where the top 0.5% of matches are now private, so you can't copy what the pros are doing. So now everyone has to figure things out for themselves. The world has the meta has become far less optimized, which means that there is opportunity for random crap to work, because not everyone that you're playing against doesn't know what the meta heroes are. So you can play an off meta hero, you can have some weird strategy and it can work because you're not playing against a full stack of all of the OP heroes. Make sense? The problem in the world today is that the meta has been figured out by the people who usually employ you. Right? People have figured out what is the minimum amount of money that I can pay someone? What is the maximum amount of rent that I can charge? Right? Now we have big data, we have private equity in housing, we have all these kinds of things going on. Walmart has a bunch of people that are subsidized on food stamps or whatever, right? So I'm not like anti-capitalism here. I'm just saying that the meta has been figured out. And since the meta has been figured out, all of the opportunity that existed, all of the random crap that you could fall backwards into, like 30 years ago, you can't do anymore. You can't walk into a place, give your resume, and find a job. It doesn't work like that anymore, because all of these processes have been optimized and the efficiency has increased like 1,000-fold. And in this efficiency increase, a lot of weird things have happened. The internet showed up, which made it easy to apply to 1,000 jobs. And so now the standard has become, now there's been an equilibrium where to find one job, you have to apply to 1,000 jobs. Like, this is bizarre. So what used to be an advantage has now become a disadvantage, has now become maladaptive. So the meta has been figured out and we are getting crushed. At the same time, I think that there are some difficult truths that we have to face if we're in this situation, because this is the situation that we're in, right? There's not like, we can complain about it, but we don't live in a world where complaining about things changes them, unfortunately. So now the question becomes, if you're actually like a millennial or Gen Z or Gen Alpha person who's getting dumpstered by how everything is optimized by people like private equity firms, and I'm not like anti-private equity, that's just the nature of things right now, okay? Now the question is, what do you do about it? So here's my first bit of advice. And this is where things are going to sound really like lack of compassion, okay? But this is like, if you want to know what to do about it, things are not going to be easy. What you have to understand is that you are playing life at a disadvantage. So all of the solutions are going to suck. It is going to be a lesser of two evils. There's no good solution here. The first thing that I would say is be careful about tiredness. So let's understand where tiredness comes from. Tiredness comes from when we see a life where there is no forward trajectory, there's no sense of hope, there's no sense of, if I invest effort, if I were to ask this person, if you were to work 10 hours harder every week, what would happen to your life? They will say nothing. So I want y'all to understand this very, very, very clearly from a neurological perspective. The moment that you conclude that additional effort will not change your life, your brain and your body will start to feel more tired. Tiredness is an energy conservation strategy. When bears hibernate, the reason they hibernate is because if they go out and they spend 10 hours looking for food in the wintertime, they will find no food. It is not worth it to invest energy because the yields will be very low. And then what do you imagine the subjective feeling of a bear is when it hibernates? It feels incredibly tired. Tiredness is a protective mechanism to conserve your energy when things look bleak and when you wait for greater opportunities to arise. The problem is, in the world that we live in, there aren't seasonal variations where it is more worthwhile to expend our energy. So what we have to do is we can't listen to our tiredness. We have to actually utilize a different mechanic. So when I exercise, I feel tired. The second aspect of tiredness is that the more you engage in tiredness-inducing activities, the more resistant to tiredness you will become. So if I exercise, I feel exhausted. The second day I go, I feel less exhausted. The third day I go, I feel less exhausted. Our body, thankfully, has an adaptive mechanism where the more that I do things that are difficult for me, the easier they will become. So then what happens is we feel tired all the time. We don't really embrace it. We're always operating on empty. And when I get a little bit of energy, I go ahead and do my work, right? And now I'm spreading my work out over 2 weekend days. And this is where I think there's another brutal truth here, which is I have never met someone who is in this situation who did not have one of two things going on. The first is some form of undiagnosed illness. We're talking anemia, hypothyroidism, depression, something like that. So there is a physiologic or psychological cause. I would even call depression physiologic. There is a medical reason for your tiredness. And if you are playing with that disadvantage, things are incredibly hard. That's number one. The second thing is cell phone usage, technology usage. So when this is something that I know people aren't going to want to hear, but like, when I see people, when I work with people who are like working 40 hours a week and they feel exhausted when they go home and can't do anything, the first question, not the first, but one of the questions that I'll ask them eventually is, can you pull out your phone and tell me what your daily cell phone usage looks like? And what people don't realize is that technology fatigues you. Here's the way that your cell phone makes you so incredibly tired. Most of our energy and our motivation come from our emotional circuits, right? If I piss you off, you are highly motivated to do something. If I make you anxious, you are highly motivated to do something. So emotions are powerful motivators of behavior. They're our most powerful motivators of behavior. Logic is not a motivator for behavior. That's why you can logically tell someone, hey, you should not eat unhealthy food. It's not good for you. And they'll continue to eat unhealthy food. Emotion is the most potent motivator that we don't have access to today. Why don't we have access to it? Because our phones and social media emotionally exhaust us. We watch this TikTok, we feel so resonant with it. We're like, oh my God, this is me. This is the world we live in. Like, this is so unfair. We feel this righteous anger. We feel indignation. We feel taken advantage of over a 2-minute TikTok. And then once those emotions calm down, we are emotionally drained. So not only are we given an incorrect amount of conditioning because the boomer generation grew up and everything was easy, so they did not teach us how to work hard. They achieved success by being lazy and lucky. So what did they pass on to us? They passed on to us not a serious work ethic. They're like, hey, just work harder and it'll work out. But if you kind of think about the lack of sophistication, what that means is that someone who just sort of showed up and exerted a little bit of effort, things worked out. Like, that's the only way they could believe that, right? Was that if that strategy worked for them, it doesn't work for us anymore because we have multi-billion-dollar PE firms that are optimizing housing prices, that are controlling markets and figuring out that I can charge $1,660 for rent. And if I charge $1,800, it'll go vacant. But if I charge $1,660, people can afford it. This is what the world has become. And so I think the harsh truth about it is, like, are we at a disadvantage? Yes. And the things that, like, the only option that you've got is to advance in your own life. I don't think that you can wait for other people to fix this situation for you. By the way, you should absolutely vote, because another really, really funny thing that happened is that we taught young people that their votes don't matter. And what happened? Then they stopped mattering, right? But we saw this in the United States, where a lot of people were upset by the results of the election. And it turns out that a lot of young men went out and voted, and they voted for Donald Trump. And this is what happened. So even if the life that I'm not saying that the life that you're living is not hard. I'm not saying that it's unfair. I'm saying that it is unfair. It is hard. You are at a disadvantage. And I don't think anyone is going to come and fix it for you. And I think there is a lot you can do to fix your life. There is a ton that you can do to fix your life. And oftentimes we have no idea how, in addition to disadvantages from the outside world, we're racking up disadvantages for ourselves. And the crazy thing about this is, like, if you're someone who feels so exhausted that you can't do anything when you come home, and then you have to work on the weekend, and you have to split up the work on 2 days, this is where, like, I've seen this completely flip around, right? So there is an alternate scenario, which I've seen happen time and time and time again, which is that you start by using your cell phone less. You start by doing whatever 15 minutes of work you can, 15 minutes a day when you get home from your job and you feel absolutely exhausted, or go to the gym. So all of the work that you would do on a Saturday and Sunday, you start sprinkling out throughout the week. Do whatever small amount that you can. Over time, your tolerance for it will increase. You will gradually do more. And then something beautiful will happen. You will have a day off on the weekend. Once you have a day off on the weekend, you will be invigorated going into the next week. Will you actually be invigorated? No. But you'll have more vigor than you did before, because now you have one day off on Saturday and, oh my God, now it's Sunday and now I have work and now it's another hard week. But at least you get some break. There's no break and there's some break. Which one is better? Which one gives you more energy? So you have some break, you have a little bit more energy. Now what do you do going into the next week? You have a little bit more energy, so you work 20 minutes instead of 15. You work 20 minutes instead of 15. Now you have a little bit more time on the weekend. So now you have a little bit more time for fun. You have a little bit more time for relaxation. And this cycle, which I see people stuck in, is a cycle. And you can start to change that cycle. I've seen it time and time and time again. Is it easy to do? No. Is it fair to do? Not at all. But it is the only way forward. I mean, I'm sure there are other options, but it is I think it's the most effective way forward. I've kind of been there myself, you know? And I think that this is where, like, I work 7 days a week. I had my first 5 days off in 5 years. It's different for me, though. So I think this is where, like, the other thing that happens is that, see, when work becomes something you have to get through, then it's really hard to work. Work drains your battery. But when work is something that you enjoy, then it changes your perspective completely. And I'm not saying that this is easy, right? So, and I think what I tend to observe is that people who enjoy their work, usually one of two scenarios: either they got really lucky, or they really invested a lot of energy for a very long time to get to where they are. So that they intentionally took a very difficult path that oftentimes involved more than 40 hours of work, 50 hours of work, 60 hours of work, 70 hours of work for extended periods of time. Right? And this is just, like, I'm not saying that this is fair or right. If you ask me, how are people happy at work? This is the path that I usually see. The third option is that they're just oblivious and everyone around them is covering for them. I've seen that too, to be fair. Okay? All right. So let's take a look at questions. So when people say, or you could be a streamer, I don't know about that. One second. Yo, what's up? Okay. Okay, perfect. All right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, people say, or you could be a streamer. I think a streamer is a good example of, like, a profession that has. I think a streamer is like one of the worst calculated professions you could have. So just to be a streamer is way harder than just being an investment banker, or I imagine even just being a doctor. I think the people who try to become a doctor and succeed is probably a higher percentage than people who try to become streamers and succeed. 90% of streamers have 400 viewers. I think that is super optimistic. So here's the research that I did. When I started streaming for the first time, I looked at statistics on it, and what I realized is that at the end of 1 month, my bar for success is at the end of 1 month to have 5 viewers. If I could average 5 concurrent viewers, I would be successful. At the end of 1 year, average 100 concurrent viewers. That was my target based on research. And then I didn't even go past that because the majority of streamers never, like 90% of streamers never make it past 90. So for me, it was like, even if people didn't watch, it was like, it was a chance for me to sort of share my ideas, kind of think about things, like get my, hopefully help. And that was a win for me, right? So if I could help 5 people in 1 hour, that is 4 more people than I could help if I was working in my office. If I could help 20 people in 1 hour if I could help 100 people by the end of a year, then that would be like 99 more people than I can help in 1 hour. So that was a huge success. So like streaming is like, this is a great example of human beings we're not good at probabilistic thinking. So I even did an analysis of esports winnings many years ago. And 98% of the Dota 2 prize pool winnings are won by 2% of the professional players. Like, that's insane, dude. Which means that 98% of 98% of players, like, earn very little. And those are professional players, right? That doesn't even include all of the amateurs who are, like, trying to go pro. Is being a streamer harder than 9 to 5? It depends on how you define hard. I think that being a streamer is being a successful streamer is one of the most tiring professions that I've ever seen. I don't think people understand how much goes into it. I don't think people understand the emotional and stress toll when you have people like stalking you and like hunting you down and following you around everywhere. Like it's wild. Is it worth it? That's a completely different question. Would people trade it? Would I trade it for something else? That's a completely different question. But is it hard? Yeah. Is it taxing? Yeah. Right? So it has a very high like burnout rate, and people just usually can't sustain that level of work. Yeah, so we're going to move on to questions. So let's take a look. Okay. Okay, what can we say to high achievers who are unhappy? I found balance by doing more, so I struggle to relate to those who do less. Oh. Wait, that disappeared. Hold on. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to do a different question. In your opinion, how effective are 1 to 2 week spiritual retreats for staying at temples, monasteries for neurotypical and neurodivergent people? Okay, so how effective are retreats for neurotypical and neurodivergent people? 1 to 2 weeks. So I think that depends on the retreat and the person. So when we're talking about efficacy, so if I say like, how efficient is a car? The question kind of becomes, well, hold on a second. Car is a bad example. Let me think about that. So if I ask a question, how efficient is a person? It's like, how do you measure that, right? You have to start by having an outcome that you're looking for. That's how you measure efficacy. There has to be an outcome. So first question is, what is the outcome that you're looking for from a spiritual retreat? I've been to many so I think there are 2 kinds of spiritual retreats. There are those that are fun, and then there are those that are good. Sometimes they overlap, but oftentimes they don't. So, one spiritual retreat that I went to had you sitting in some combination of Padmasana, lotus posture, Vajrasana, thunderbolt pose, or Siddhasana, adept's pose, for like 9 to 10 hours a day. So that's not like a fun retreat. Like, you're meditating for 9 to 10 hours a day. Very, very intense, really hard, kind of feels like physical torture. So I've had retreats like that are really great, and I've had retreats like that are not as great. There are other kinds of spiritual retreats that are more like wellness spiritual retreats. Those are oftentimes very fun and very relaxing, and you feel like you learn a lot. I don't know how much you actually learn. There's also some your mileage may vary there. So I think it depends a lot on what your goals are and what the retreat offers, which I know is a silly answer, but if you're looking for, so I'd say if you're thinking about spiritual retreats, the first thing that you should do is think a little bit about what are you trying to accomplish, and then find a retreat that like at least proclaims that it does that kind of thing. And this is the third thing that I'd say is oftentimes for the things that you want to accomplish, I don't know that you need to go on a formal spiritual retreat as opposed to something like a temple stay. So oftentimes, if you have like a personal spiritual goal and you want some degree of instruction, one of my favorite versions of this is I would go to an ashram and I would see if they could teach me something over the span of like 10 days. So I'd line up my ashram visit with some kind of course of like meditation that I wanted to learn. I would say I got super lucky. 30 to 40% of the time, there would be someone there that would basically make a course or teach me personally, which is not that, I don't know how common it is now, but like it was pretty common because you just have people who are like, they're doing their own meditation every day. And they're like, a week, some guy shows up and he's like, hey, can you teach me something? They're like, sure. That's just how the tradition works. So that's the first thing. Now, if you're neurodiverse, spiritual retreats become complicated for a couple of reasons. The first is that oftentimes people who are neurodiverse have a lot of very specific, I wouldn't say restriction, let's say specific neurological preferences for the food that you eat, right? So if we look at things like ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, if we look at sensory processing in autism and ADHD, oftentimes we tend to be picky eaters. And if we're picky eaters, then it's really challenging because our food is oftentimes very restricted in spiritual retreats. So one of the things that you have to figure out is what your tolerance for their food is. And even if is it like something that you really can't eat, or is it just something that's uncomfortable? Maybe you'll be able to get away with it. Maybe you'll manage. Second thing is, depending on your degree of neurodiversity, can you participate in the retreat? So generally speaking, I found that people with high functioning autism can participate in most retreats. And this is the hard part for me to say, without too much difficulty. Can they participate? Have I seen it? 100%. By the way, if y'all are interested, we have a awesome, Dr. Thorderson is putting on a skills workshop for neurodiversity. So emotional, I don't know if it's emotional and social skills. I don't remember exactly. Let me see if I can find out what exactly she's going to be teaching. But one of the things that we get a lot is, so we get a lot of requests, like questions like this. This was the top voted question that, what about people who are neurodiverse? So what we sort of realized is that like offering advice for people with neurodiversity is not necessarily the best, because there is a diversity within neurodiversity. So not everyone has the same challenges. Some people have stuff on the ARFID spectrum. Some people have attentional problems. Some people have sensory issues. So Dr. Thorderson is actually holding a workshop. It's 6 hours of actionable skills for people with neurodiversity to help you. It helps us. The way that I kind of understand it is that, you have a power adapter that's like, let's say an North American power adapter, and you're going to the EU, and the EU has like an EU socket, and I have a US power adapter. It doesn't plug in. So my experience with neurodiversity is that you have to learn a different way of interfacing with the world in order to be successful. That's what Dr. Thorderson is going to be teaching for 6 hours, like specific actionable techniques that basically are like an EU power adapter so that you know how to interface with a neurotypical world. Because there are so many things that neurotypical people just like take for granted with the way that they do stuff. That just is hard to deal with. And so when I work with patients, a big part of it is figuring out, okay, what are the actionable skills that we need to use? Do I meditate every day? This is a question I get a lot. And people ask me this question over and over again on purpose. And the answer is yes, I meditate every day. Let's just say yes. Definitely true of the last 2 years. I do more formal sitting meditation practice now than I did before. but I used to meditate even every day. Okay. Do you have any advice? Okay, so I guess like we're just up. Okay, so next question. Do you have any advice for people with ADHD who have life events that disrupt their habits? It's demoralizing to have to fix your life over and over. So I just mentioned a workshop. So that's what that workshop is for things like that. So let me answer the question, okay? See, if you have ADHD, usually the experience, like if you've got ADHD, this is how life goes. You struggle for a while and then you figure out some kind of stable equilibrium. Okay. You figure out like, okay, I finally got stuff in order. Like I have my habits set, I have my routine set. The learning curve to adapt to a neurotypical world is really high. And then everything gets set. And then the really unfortunate thing is that life happens. There's some kind of disruption to your schedule. There's some kind of disruption to your motivation. There's something happens. So the life that you have painstakingly crafted is actually quite fragile. And then something comes along and then ruins it, and then you have to pick up the pieces and try to build it over and over and over again. So this is such a common experience. And I think the reason that this happens is because we don't know. There are oftentimes certain, I don't want to say tricks, but there are certain techniques that people with ADHD can learn that will allow them to function more smoothly within the world. Now, I'm not saying that this is fair. I'm just saying that it is effective. So let me try to give you all an example. So I think a great example of this is like actually habit. So this person said habit. So in ADHD, habits are fully intact. So habits are governed by the endocannabinoid circuitry. The deficits in ADHD tend to be in the frontal lobes and in executive function. Things like our perception of time, like time blindness, stuff like that. We've got a great video about that on YouTube. You should check that out. But there are certain systems that are completely intact in ADHD. Like your habit system is completely intact. The problem is that in ADHD, even though your ability to follow a habit is completely intact, building habits is hard. So let's understand why habits are so important in ADHD. So in ADHD, my attention wavers. I lose track of what I'm doing. I'm now focusing on this and my body starts to put things on autopilot. So a great example of this is I walk into the house, I'm thinking about something else. I just set my keys down in a random place. And then it becomes hard to find my keys because I set it down in a random place. Where did I put it? I wasn't paying attention. I don't know. So now finding my keys becomes a 15-minute endeavor 3 times a week. Now, the interesting thing, if we really look at it technically, ADHD is losing track of your attention, right? Now I'm thinking about something else. So now the question becomes, when I lose my focus, which autopilot script kicks in? If you have built good habits, the autopilot that kicks in will not be harmful. If I built a habit to put my keys in the same place every single time, even if I'm not paying attention, I won't lose them. So living successfully with ADHD, living easily with ADHD is all about finding substitutes for things that work for normal people. So a normal person doesn't have to put their keys in the same place every day because they remember when they put them down. They pay attention when they put them down. Neurotypical people. So it's not just habits. There are all kinds of other things. So for example, when I'm working with my daughter to help her understand theory of mind, we'll do certain things like we'll play D&D. So in D&D, I've seen her understand theory of mind in a way that I've never seen her understand it before, because I was trying to explain to her that her character knows certain things, but that are different from what she knows. There's a difference between what your character knows and what you know. So this is an example of using a technique that is not part of neurotypical development to enhance a certain function of ADHD. So she has a lot of trouble empathizing with other people. She has a lot of trouble understanding why her sister wouldn't do what she would do. So how do we teach that technique? There is a set of basically connectors that you have to build in your own life. You have to substitute habit for attention. You have to substitute a certain amount of visuospatial learning. You have to start adding, so a couple of other simple tricks. One is meditate with your eyes open. Here's a key thing with ADHD. If you want to focus, chances are for neurotypical people, if they want to focus, we need to reduce their stimulation. The more stimuli I get, the less focused I will be if I'm neurotypical. What happens in ADHD, and there's a beautiful video of this, if I don't receive enough stimulation, my body and my mind will create stimulation for me. I need some baseline level of stimulation to be able to focus. This is why kids, when you tell them to sit and listen, will start fidgeting. They need some kind of input into their brain in order to calm them down. This is why fidget spinners can also be really good. So it's about understanding how your brain is different and developing compensatory mechanisms. If you do this, it will become way easier to live your life with ADHD. And not only that, I know that sometimes people get upset at me for saying this, but I've had plenty of patients, and this is my personal lived experience, that there are certain aspects of ADHD that I think make me better and more effective. I don't think it's a coincidence that 30 to 40% of streamers have ADHD, maybe even higher. Really successful streamers, by the way, have ADHD. Because their ability to process information overload. What would be information overload? Chat, this person is messaging me, Discord DMs, this other chat, this person subbed, the person has a super chat that has a question. The ability to process all of that information very quickly, I think is easier for people with ADHD. That's why I think so many streamers who are incredibly successful have crippling ADHD in the real world. So it's all about finding some of these connectors, right? Now the next question is going to be, okay, how do you do that? So I've given y'all a couple of examples today. If y'all want more, check out Dr. Thorderson's workshop, right? So she's teaching this stuff for 6 hours. These are actionable skills that you can apply. So if that's interesting to you, definitely check it out. And by the way, if you guys are wondering, why are we doing a workshop on ADHD? So today is a day about self-improvement. The top 2 questions are about neurodiversity and ADHD. So this is the most, it doesn't matter what we talk about. We can talk about spirituality. We can talk about productivity. We can talk about dating. There are always issues that neurodiverse people are concerned about. And the advice that we give, which is based on a neurotypical makeup, doesn't translate 100%. So for whatever reason, these are the top voted questions all the time. Isn't focusing on breathing to get used to distress a distraction? Why does it work, but gaming doesn't? Great question. So now we have to be precise. Why is focusing on my breathing, is it a distraction? And why doesn't gaming work? So is it a distraction? Sort of. So we have to be precise with our language. What focusing on my breathing does is puts a brake on the current thought process. Gaming also puts a brake on the current thought process. Do y'all understand that? If I have a chain of anxiety, if I'm working myself up into a panic attack, I have to stop that. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Breathing does that and gaming does that. But there are a couple of very important differences. Breathing tends to be time limited, number one, right? So you're not removing yourself from the situation as a whole. You are engaging in a temporary, you can call it a distraction. I would call it a break in the thought process. You're creating a break in the thought process, but you are not changing the situation. You are simply existing within that situation. You continue to exist there with some degree of mental distraction. Fair enough. Gaming removes you mentally from the situation entirely, because at the end of 60 seconds of breathing, you're still back where you started, which is the point. If I feel anxious about something and I start playing a video game, I'm gone for an hour. The second thing that gaming does is gaming makes my attention lazy. I don't have to try to focus at all, right? So with breathing, there is an internal struggle that persists and makes us strong mentally. So it's kind of like doing push-ups for your frontal lobes. Gaming, it's easy. It becomes easy to forget. This is the key difference between gaming and breathing. Breathing requires effort to be distracted. Gaming requires no effort to be distracted. One of us leaves us stronger. One of us leaves us weaker. One of them leaves us weaker. You'll understand the difference? Because I have to try to breathe. I don't have to try to game. So one of us deconditions us over time. One of us increases our conditioning over time. Huge difference. The third thing is the physiological activation of the two. Deep breathing, generally speaking, will activate our vagus nerve, activate our parasympathetic nervous system, physiologically reduce our anxiety. Gaming may reduce our anxiety in the short term, but then it activates our emotions in other ways. Right? So the reason that games are fun is, sure, they're relaxing, but they're also engaging. They're also stressful. They're also triumphant. There's triumph and loss and all kinds of different emotions when it comes to gaming. Usually those emotions are not created by the breathing. Sometimes emotions can come up if they're dormant, but that's different. The third thing, the third thing that's important here is that when gaming activates all of our emotions, the emotional exhaustion we experience after gaming is the same as emotional exhaustion from other parts of life. So we're activating all of these emotions, and then our brain is tired at the end. So when you game for a while, even though you're sitting on your ass, you feel exhausted. You don't feel energized usually after playing a game. Maybe if you play for 1 or 2 hours, depending on what your stress state is, you can like kind of get back to work. Like that happens sometimes. But generally speaking, gaming is not like, no one's like, we're not watching like morning fitness routines where someone's like, I wake up at 4 a.m. and then I play fucking League of Legends for 4 hours. And then I'm charged and I'm ready to go take on the world. Like I have never, and I mean this, like 100%. I have never seen a fitness routine energizing video that starts with 4 hours of gaming and then I'm ready to take on the world. Never seen it. Not once. And that's because gaming is exhausting. Once our amygdala and our limbic system and our social emotions get activated and then they calm down, right? So once they sort of activate and extinguish, our brain is fatigued. And then it becomes hard to feel emotions with other things. It gets hard to be excited about work. And it even can become hard to feel afraid about work. Usually, like at the end of gaming, we just feel numb more than anything else. Right? Sometimes you can feel like super anxious about work because then when you go back to it, there's a gigantic pile of stuff that has been left dormant and suppressed that can come roaring back. But that's different. I don't know if that kind of makes sense. That's just like procrastination, emotions piling up. But even then, we feel kind of like numb towards it when we come back from gaming. So gaming and breathing are very different. You're spot on that like both of them will truncate the thought process that induces anxiety in the moment. But the mechanism of action is incredibly different. One leaves us weaker, one leaves us stronger. Great question. What's the difference between the addiction to productivity to fix some emotional problem and the pull of dharma and feeling unfulfilled until I follow it? So the difference is the feeling itself. So this is going to be hard because we don't have very precise language to describe this stuff. In English, the majority of our language is not concerned with internal states. It's concerned with external things. So forget about 100 words for snow in Eskimos. We have so many words to describe finance. We have so many words to describe science, right? Ventral, dorsal, medial, lateral, anterior, posterior. We have a lot of precision. mRNA, DNA, ribosomes, rRNA. There's all kinds of stuff. Like we have all these specific words for all these things, all these different builds. Are you going fire build? Are you going power coding? Are you using bow? Are you using light bow gun? Are you using heavy bow gun with this coating, this ammo? this trinket, this decoration, like we have so much precision. We have very poor precision from our internal environment. So the kind of pull from dharma or duty or from a calling in life is subjectively different from an emotion. Okay? So how do you tell the difference? The first thing is that emotions tend to come and go a lot more. So literally, if you look at the way that our brain activates when we feel emotions, emotions are by definition time limited. So the moment that my brain experiences an emotion, a timer starts in the brain that will turn off the emotion. And this is just how the body works. There's like homeostasis, okay? So the moment that I inhale, the trigger to exhale will already start. The moment that I exhale, the trigger to inhale will begin. So there's a timer that goes with each action that we take. When we feel an emotion, it will end on its own. The call of duty is more subtle. It also tends to be more persistent. And I feel like oftentimes when so that's the first thing is like the pattern of activation and extinguishment is way more rapid with emotions, way slower with dharma. The other thing is that generally speaking, emotions are oftentimes when we're trying to fix our problems, emotions are moving away from something. So I'm going to the gym because I don't want to feel ugly. I'm studying extra because I don't want to be a loser. I don't want to be a failure. So oftentimes emotional motivation, and this is biologically true too, is moving away from the negative. It's not moving towards something, it's moving away from something. And we know this because our negative emotions are much more powerful than our positive emotions. Fear, generally speaking, can control our behavior way easier than curiosity can. So dharma is oftentimes moving towards something. With emotions, oftentimes when we're moving, like when we're being driven by our emotions, we operate between pain and relief. When we're moving towards dharma, we operate between neutrality and fulfillment. Those are two very different things. So when you move in this direction, do you feel relieved or do you feel fulfilled? And what you'll discover is that there are, like, I'm just giving y'all some, I'm still not describing the feeling. The feeling is something that you have to feel. It kind of makes sense, right? It's like, what is it like to have your head underwater? If you've never done it, it's really hard to describe. And at the same time, I can give y'all some, like, I don't know, like coordinates on the map to keep an eye out for. Is that going to be sufficient to make it super easy for you to detect the two? No, not at all. Right? It's still going to be challenging, but look at those two things. When I do this action, do I feel good about myself? Do I feel like I'm moving forward? And even good about myself, do I feel good? Not good. Be precise with what you feel. Do you feel better because you feel less bad, or do you feel better because you feel more good? Those are two different things. But we're so dull with our perception that oftentimes we don't pay attention to the difference. The two just get muddled in our mind. And so as you pay attention more, you will get better at it. The other aspect that I'll leave y'all with, and if you guys want more detail on this stuff, this is stuff that we cover more often in memberships, but I'm thinking to myself that I need to make some of this content for the main channel. But we cover this stuff a lot, like these different layers of internal stuff. So one last thing, what was I going to say? Dharma versus emotion. What's the difference? Give me a second. It'll come. Oh, yeah. So here's the key thing, biggest thing. When your mind is peaceful and quiet, dharma is easier to hear. When your mind is peaceful and quiet, emotion becomes absent. That's the other big difference. So in the silence of your contentment, what floats to the surface? That will be dharma, usually not emotion. And this is where things get super complicated, because even your dharma can lead you to deal with your emotions, right? So I'll give you all, I'm going to try to explain this. So there's a difference between, oh my God, I'm so tired of being anxious. I'm so lonely. I'm so insecure. I hate this. Oh my God, I hate my life. I hate dealing with this every day. I'm so exhausted. Everything sucks. And sitting there one day and being on vacation and looking back at your life and being like, you know what? This is just really not healthy. I got to make a change. I got to make a change in my life. I can't continue living like this anymore. It's time for me to start living a life that is different. So in both of these situations, there is a desire to change. But the place where that voice is coming from and the quality of that voice is very different. That is the difference between emotion and dharma. Hopefully that's helpful. Great question. Love these. Okay. What do I do when I struggle with change and healing because I feel like I am my trauma, and if I change, I lose who I am? I am attached to my trauma. So your trauma makes you who you are, and then you're afraid to heal because if you heal, you stop being you. And how do I respond to this? The answer is yes, you are correct. This is why, see, a lot of people don't realize this, but when it comes to a lot of mental illness, there is a large part of you that doesn't want to get better, especially with trauma. I'm not saying that there isn't a large part of you that wants, a large part of you wants to change, and you are afraid to change. So let's understand why people want to change in trauma, but are reluctant to change and run away from change. So here's the first thing. Trauma teaches you to be a survivor, not an optimizer. There's no room for efficiency. The goal becomes survival. The goal becomes getting through, right? Surviving until tomorrow. So when the goal becomes surviving, what we want to do is avoid uncertainty. So if you're a survivor of trauma, you may have noticed that when you were in your traumatic situation, you engaged in all kinds of small behaviors to keep yourself safe. So working with a lot of gamers who grew up with a history of abuse, the most common example is we go into gaming to become invisible. We learn how to become invisible, right? We learn how to be small. We learn how to not be noticed. We learn how to be appeasing. We learn how to be not contrarian. We learn all of these techniques, and these are the things that keep us safe. If I stop doing those things, one of two things will happen. Either I will be in danger, right? In a certain circumstance, this is clearly danger. So if I have a parent who's an alcoholic and starts yelling at me if they notice that I'm doing something, literally there's a very clear danger. But then the problem is now I've learned this lesson, and even when I'm at work, even when I'm on a date, I have this instinct to be invisible. And if I start being visible, it's not that I will necessarily experience danger. I will experience something worse than danger, which is uncertainty. And you may say, but hold on a second. Why is guaranteed danger better than uncertainty for someone with a history of trauma? And that is because someone with a history of trauma knows they can survive a certain kind of danger. If you've been abused by your alcoholic parent for 15 years, you can survive their spells, but you have no idea what else could be out in the world. The world becomes a fundamentally dangerous place, and uncertainty is the worst thing to be avoided at all costs. Because even with the devil, you know you can survive that because you're good at surviving. And so you become attached to your current iteration of self. You become attached to the small version, the shy version, the invisible version. And getting rid of that becomes really scary. Because this person that you are is a survivor. And if you get rid of that, what will you become? You have no idea. You've worked really hard to become the person that you are today. You've experienced a lot of pain and suffering. It isn't easy to get to you. And so people are very naturally reluctant to get rid of their identity. It's hard. It becomes confusing. It becomes scary. That's why it has to be done in small steps. So we have a couple of videos about, trauma and identity and dissociation on YouTube. There's a whole guide to trauma where we talk about identity and narrative. That's like literally one of the sections is how do you change your identity? Okay. Because I'm answering a question now, but there's like absolutely somewhere between 2 and 4 hours of a lecture that you could prepare and we have built somewhere in there, right? That goes into this in more detail, but it's a beautiful question. Is laziness even a real thing? I think yes and no. So I think laziness is a real thing, but I think 80% of the laziness that we describe are other things that we don't have good visibility into. So laziness is real, but 80% of laziness is something else, is my take. Okay. Last question, okay? How do I improve myself and progress without losing my identity while also forgiving for past mistakes? How do I improve myself and progress without losing my identity while also forgiving myself for past mistakes? So here's the thing. Oftentimes I'll get questions where people are like, how do I make my parents happy without disappointing myself? How do I go to the gym and start to become more positive how do I start working out without feeling, embarrassed when I go to the gym? How do I ask out boys or girls without feeling embarrassed? So I want y'all to appreciate the structure of this question and what we really look for. So if you say, how do I do X without Y while also doing Z? You have now increased the difficulty that you are trying to achieve by threefold. Right? How do I do one thing while also doing something while avoiding a third thing? That becomes incredibly difficult. So if your goal is to do all three of these conditions at the same time, becomes very hard. I don't know, is the short answer. So generally speaking, what I find is when people ask me, how do I go to the gym without feeling embarrassed about myself? How do I put myself out there without being afraid? What I notice is that there is a goal that they are trying to achieve, and there is an emotional experience that they're trying to avoid when they accomplish the goal. How do I make $1 million without working hard? I totally understand that you want to do that. I want to do that too. But is that possible? Possibly. I don't know. It's exceedingly difficult. See, if you ask me, how do I not work hard? I can tell you. If you ask me, how do I make $1 million? I can tell you. If you ask me, how do I make $1 million without working hard? I don't know. Get lucky? Buy crypto 20 years ago? I don't know. See the future? So the conditions that we place upon ourselves when we are trying to progress are oftentimes what paralyze us. So you pick one. Right? So if people say, how do I ask people out without feeling embarrassed? That's where I say, like, my job is to help people ask people out despite being embarrassed. So I think the right move here is that you have to decide what kind of life you want to live. Do you want to live a life where your internal state is easy or your external life is good? You can't have both. Do I want a good life on the outside, or do I want a lack of disturbance on the inside? If you want a complete lack of disturbance, go to the Himalayas and spend the rest of your life as a monk. You'll still get disturbed, but hopefully they'll teach you to deal with it. Right? And this is the challenge, is everyone asks these questions, how do I do this without this, while doing this? So if you want to improve yourself, let go of your identity. right? So like this is where like we get to the crux of it. Someone saying, how do I improve myself and progress without losing my identity while also forgiving myself for past mistakes? So improve yourself. You will lose a part of your identity. Let it go. And when you let that go, maybe there will be forgiveness. Maybe losing your identity is how you give yourself forgiveness. Just letting it go. Or you're combining multiple things. The path to forgive yourself is separate from the path from improving yourself. And I think generally speaking, when people engage in improvement and you let those feelings come up, you manage those feelings, whatever comes up, that's how your identity improves in the right way. And if we look at like healing, right? So I want to show you all something. Give me a second. So I have cool. How do I improve myself and forgive myself without losing my identity? And then I say, losing your identity is the point. So, some researchers hypothesize that the therapeutic effects of psychedelics come from their acute subjective effects, specifically ego dissolution. This systematic review aimed to investigate what clinical studies can support this hypothesis. By reviewing 5 studies that examined this correlation, this review found that the majority of the studies could present a moderate correlation. So literally, therapeutic improvement comes with changes in identity. Those two things are hand in hand. And it's not just this study on psychedelics. We can look at papers on the default mode network and depression. The default mode network is our perception of ourself, like who I am, who I think I am. And in people who have major depressive disorder and are suicidal, their default mode network is hyperactive. Their sense of identity is hyperactive. I'm a loser. I'm pathetic. I don't deserve forgiveness. Right? How can I forgive myself? I'm such a loser. I could have done so much better. I. Losing your identity is the goal, not the thing to be avoided. And this is what the yogis have been saying for thousands of years. Focus on the I, not what comes after the I. Right? When we think about people who are peaceful, they're oftentimes not thinking about themselves. When you are enjoying a cup of coffee, let's say you're standing out on a balcony, you're on vacation in the mountains, and you have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea in your hands, and you're just basking in the moment. You're not thinking, I am really enjoying my life. You are enjoying your life. You are just absorbed there. Then there's another kind of person who does think about that. You know what we call that person? We call them an influencer. Because for all of the joyous moments in their life, they are thinking, oh, I have to show this to people. I have to share it with people. I have to set the camera angle. I need to look right when I'm enjoying my cup of coffee. All of the joys of life become part of our ego. Make sense? Now, is it scary to let go of identity? 100%. Are we designed to let go of identity? No. Right? We have developed an adaptation, which is called an ego. It helps us function and survive and thrive in life. But just like any other part of the body, sometimes if it's not taken care of in the right way, it causes us more trouble than it's worth. Other examples of this include things like the appendix and even our taste buds. When we let our taste buds run the show, it hurts us. When we let our ego run the show, it hurts us. So great question. I see this all the time. How do I do this without being hurt? Right? Actually, this is the best example. How do I break up with my partner without hurting them? So I think breaking up with your partner is going to hurt them, and that is an acceptable outcome. You can try to minimize the damage as much as possible. You don't have to be malicious, but The moment that they decided to love you, they opened themselves up to the karma of getting hurt. The moment that you decided to fall in love, or you let yourself fall in love, or you didn't run away from being in love, is the moment that you signed up for the possibility of hurt. So if y'all are stuck in life, number one reason for being stuck in life is that we are not willing to accept the consequences of our actions. Since we don't accept the consequences of our actions, we don't act. Instead, accept the consequences of your actions and act. So be it. This will hurt. So be it. And act anyway. As you start living your life like that, the total amount of suffering that you experience will over time go down. May not be 100% true, but generally speaking, I found this to work for 95+% of my patients. I want to say 99%, but I haven't done that calculation. Okay? Awesome, y'all. Thank you very much for coming today. It's been great. Hope today was helpful. And yeah, check out the so we've got social skills for. Oh, let me see exactly what it was. Hold on. What was it? Yeah, social skills for neurodivergent brains. This is the thing that like we looked at our community and we were like, how can we help? And what we found, for those of y'all that are wondering, I saw a post recently about, oh my God, is Healthy Gamer just becoming another thing that sells things? No. But I know this is kind of like maybe hard to understand. I'm not trying to be like condescending asshole here, but like we're here to help. Y'all get that? But help sometimes, I know it's crazy, means offering something besides a stream or a YouTube video. We can help 15 million people a year in this way, but I don't know how many hours of streaming I will have to do in order to improve the social lives of people with neurodiversity. Like how many hours of streaming achieves 6 hours of actionable skill building? Does that make sense? So the reason that we do this additional stuff is because we can help a lot of people a little bit, sometimes a lot, which we're totally committed to. And then there are other people who need more and want more or want things faster. So the other big thing that I'm a big believer of is like, everyone talks about, so when I was starting Healthy Gamer, even today, people will approach us and they're like, hey, Dr. K, do you want this pile of money? And I'll be like, what's the catch? And the catch is, oh, you give us a slice of this company. And I was like, what does that come with? And they're like, well, we expect this amount of money in X amount of time. So we give you money now. You give us a lot more money later. And I was like, yeah, I'm not really in it. And they're like, you'll make a bunch of money too. I'm like, yeah, they're not so much about the money. And they're like, no, but think about how many more people you could help. Think about all the good you could do with this pile of money. Like, think you're here to help people? Great. You can help 100 people today. We can help you help 1,000 people. Think about that. And I get that. I really do. And the key thing the reason that we do this stuff, the real reason, is I want you to think about your life for a second. I want you to think about the trajectory of your life. And if you were to, let's say, substantially improve one aspect of your life over the course of one day or 12 weeks or whatever, what does that do to the trajectory of your life? Right? So in startups, we always talk about accelerating capital, like capital that accelerates your growth. What I want y'all to realize, and this is something I think a lot of people, this is such a big mistake. You look at your problems as if it's okay for them to exist every single day. You're like, yeah, I have low confidence. I'll fix it at some point. Right? I'll work on it, like vaguely. I'm going to watch something on the internet. That's how I'm going to fix my and then you go on because you can tolerate not believing in yourself. You can tolerate lack of confidence because you can play video games today. You can hit the fast forward button on your life. What really bothers me is like how much people are missing out on the life itself. And then they wake up one day and they're like, I wasted my 20s. How did you waste your 20s? And then they will post about, oh, I wasted my 20s, but they're still not willing to commit to action today or investing resources today. So they spend their 30s complaining about how they wasted their 20s. It's like what I wish, if there's one thing I wish I could change in you, it would be an impatience and a willingness to exert time and energy to make a substantial substantial change in your life today. What are you waiting for? There's only upside to gain. You have to pay some cost at the front. Actually, that's not true. There's not only upside to gain. Ton of landmines of problems. Waste of time, waste of effort, waste of money. Hurt when you try to do something and it doesn't work. There's actually all kinds of problems. There's a reason why everyone is reluctant to do anything, right? We're all reluctant to do anything. We're just sort of content to do nothing. I take that back now that I think about it. It actually makes a lot of sense. That's why everyone does it. If everyone's doing it, there's a damn good reason. Y'all get me? Like, that's why we do it. We don't want to make a change because what the fuck? We've tried this shit before. We spent money. It didn't work. I got hurt. What kills you, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. No, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger or cripples you for the rest of life. I say this as a medical doctor who has seen injuries. There was a patient I had who was standing too close to the curb. A car swerved a little bit, bumped the curb, knocked a leg off. Gone. Didn't kill him. Didn't make him stronger. Just crippled him for life. Happens. So I get it. Okay, I take that back. But I still say, even though it is hard to invest in your improvement, like, there's good times. Like, I'm not saying, so here's the other thing. When it comes to wasting your time, I don't know if y'all get this. How do I say this? Let me think. See, people who waste their time, the biggest mistake, I think, is that every 1 hour, the first hour that how can I say this? Okay, so I've been working on this video for like 6 months, and I'm still working on it. And it is, what is the cost of 1 hour of gaming? So a lot of people out there will think to themselves like, oh, I need to stop gaming because I game for 14 hours a day. What I think people don't realize is you don't need to stop gaming. What I think people don't realize is that if you cut down from 14 to 13 or 13 to 12, each hour that you cut back actually gives you diminishing returns, right? So if I go from 14 hours a day of gaming to 12 hours a day of gaming, and I have 2 hours of productive work, I start exercising every day, and I start cooking meals for myself. If I do these two things, the first 2 hours are worth the most. And the funny thing is that each additional hour of gaming brings you less pleasure. You're trading in 2 hours of gaming in which you gain a ton. But you don't lose much enjoyment because you're still playing for 12 hours. Those last 2 hours aren't even fun. You just can't stop. And this is something that, like, I started doing in my own life, and like, hopefully, like, it'll turn into a video at some point. But it's like, what I started doing is I started cutting back on my gaming. And I was like, instead of playing a game, instead of starting Dota at 5 p.m., I'm going to start at 6 p.m. I'm going to just do this one thing for 1 hour. And what I noticed is, like, I started going to the gym 3 times a week. It's like I can just go to the gym real quick and then come back and start Dota at 6 instead of 5. Right? And it's like, hold on a second. Just think about this. Think about the yield. Cutting back on Dota for 3 hours a week allows me to go to the gym for 3 hours a week, which is like a pretty big check. And I'm not trying to say like I'm swole or anything. I'm just trying not to, have a heart attack at 65. Like, that's the goal. Doing basic cardiovascular exercise so that I don't die because I'm in my 40s. Okay? But do y'all get that? Like, how much enjoyment do you give up when I'm playing Dota for 25 hours a week and I drop down to 22 and I'm like reaching my exercise goals? Like, that shit is so OP. Like, why don't we do that? Does that make sense? I don't know. Anyway, so hopefully we'll like turn that into something more formal, but I wanted to share that with y'all today. So thank y'all very much for coming. Right? It's kind of weird. Everyone's like so drastic. They're like, I need to cut this thing out of my life. You don't need to cut it, just do it less. Okay? Thank y'all very much, everybody. I'll see y'all when I see y'all.